I'm professor of law at the Quinney College of Law at the University of Utah. Before I read more of her credentials, I just want to tell you a personal story about her. So in 2019, I was lucky enough to be on the search committee for our new dean at the law school. And that's when I first met Dean Kronk Warner. As you can imagine, we had really amazing candidates for the dean, the best of the best in the country apply for this position. And then it was our job to pick the best of the best of the best, which we did. But when the day I interviewed the dean and went to dinner with her with a group of other people, she was the only candidate who wore a University of Utah pin. And I'll just never forget that. I think she was also wearing a red jacket like she is today. So very smart. And obviously we were bowled over by her, so impressed. And she was, of course, selected to be the dean. We picked her because she was the best, but we got this extra bonus that she's the first. Sorry, this makes me a little emotional. She was our first female dean at the University of Utah, and the first person of color, the first Native American dean. And as a woman who's practiced in law for 27 years, I was emotional that day, and I guess I'm emotional today. I just was so thrilled to see this milestone, another milestone passed of a woman in that position and a person of color taking that position. So that was a great moment for me, and hopefully for you too, Dean. But after that, I worked with the dean quite a bit. I'm on the board of trustees at the law schools. We've worked together, and I've just continued to be so impressed with the dean. She's just such an amazing leader, and her academic scholarship, the way she just promotes everyone around her. And something else I really appreciate about her is how much she talks about her husband and her son Thomas. I think all of us being who we are, all of what we are, we're not all just lawyers, right? We have other parts of our lives. We're parents, we're spouses, we have other interests and hobbies, we're family members, and I think it's great to be loud and proud about who you are and all the pieces of your life, so that's really amazing. So Dean Kronk Warner is a nationally recognized expert in intersection of environmental and Indian law. She's taught courses in property, Indian environmental and natural resources law, and supervised the Tribal Judicial Support Clinic at the University of Kansas School of Law, where she was before she joined the University of Utah. She also teaches and coaches several moot court competitions, my favorite. She's received several teaching excellence awards, co-authored several books on environmental issues and Native Americans, and has over 40 articles and book chapters to her credit. Dean Kronk Warner is a citizen of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians, served as an appellate judge for the tribe, and as a district judge for the Prairie Band, I'm going to try to say this correctly, Potawatomi tribe. Is that okay? Okay, good. Dean Kronk Warner actively engages in activities around legal education in our profession, and that's why it's going to be so great to hear from her today. She serves as the chair of the AALS, that's the Association of American Law School Steering Committee. She's chair of their Membership Review Committee and will be the co-chair of the 2023 ABA New Deans Workshop. So she's leading out everywhere. She serves as a trustee on the LSAC Board of Trustees, that's the Law School Admission Council. These are people making decisions about what it's going to be like for people to apply for law school and to get to go to law school. These are really important committees. And she's also on the LSAC DEI and audit committees. As dean, she also has the privilege of serving as an ex officio member of the Utah State Bar Commission. She holds a JD from the University of Michigan, a BS from Cornell, and also studied at the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore. So as you can see, in every way possible, Dean Kronk Warner is out there working on our theme today, which is Stronger Together. Obviously, the University of Utah and BYU and the other law schools do so much to also promote diversity and put that at the top of the page. She leads out in all of the things about inclusiveness. We look forward to hearing more about her perspectives and all these coalitions, about the Utah legal community, about the University of Utah, and everything beyond that. Thank you, Dean Kronk Warner, for coming today.
I got to transition with David Lita, and then I got to work with Christina as our board president, and we had some wonderful times. So it was just truly a privilege. And I do remember being announced as dean, and I had this great moment of where I thought, yay, I got the job, and then it was like, holy cow, I got the job. And I was really nervous because I hadn't had the pleasure of living in Utah before, and so I didn't know all the great things about Utah, and I was worried about being the first female and racially diverse dean at the College of Law. And I have to say, this luncheon is proof of how wrong I was. I share Melinda's feelings when she talked about how excited she is about this bar and about this profession. And I have to say, you know, Utah's amazing. This community is an amazing part. It feels like I'm coming back to a reunion, just being in this room with all these wonderful people. So thank you for being so warm and opening and for welcoming me and just being an amazing group of professionals who are committed to these issues. My pronouns are she and hers, and if you've heard me chat before, you know that I like to start with a tribal acknowledgement statement. That we acknowledge that this land, which is named for the Ute tribe, is the traditional ancestral homeland of the Shoshone, Paiute, Goshoot, and Ute tribes. The University of Utah recognizes and respects the enduring relationship that exists between many indigenous peoples and their traditional homelands. We respect the sovereign relationship between tribes, states, and the federal government, and we affirm the University of Utah's commitment to a partnership with Native nations and urban Indian communities through research, education, and community outreach activities. Now, what I really love about our wonderful recipients of awards and about UCLI is you just heard speeches that make the point of my presentation, which is that UCLI and you all who have given are engaged in anti-racist activities. Every one of our students or former students who just came up and talked about how there was some obstacle in their background that made it difficult for them, whether it was studying for the LSAT, whether it was having to go to school without a job, some institutional instance of structural racism in our existing scheme that, not for competency reasons, but for other reasons, precluded the ability to achieve. And that's why things like a scholarship to support somebody to study for the LSAT is so incredibly impactful. Because data shows, and as Christina mentioned, I sit on the LSAT board, that this gap in difference for LSAT scores between racialized minorities and non-racialized minorities is not due to competence. It's due to affluence. It's due to, do you have time to take off to study for the LSAT? Do you have time to dedicate 400 hours, which is what we recommend you do in order to prepare for that test? And the reality is that many communities don't. The same is true for the bar exam. Many folks who are able to take those 6 weeks off before the bar exam are able to do better on the bar exam, not because they're smarter, but because they were in a position of privilege to be able to take that time off to study for the exam. So kudos to UCLI, kudos to those of you who have donated, who are actively taking anti-racist steps, thinking about scholarships to support students, thinking about ways to close these structural racist gaps that can then help students to have an equal playing field and have the opportunity to succeed in careers. Because again, it's not a difference in competence. It's not. It's a difference in these other factors. So big kudos to all the students who received scholarships and to all of you who have supported this incredibly important work. So I went through a deep dive, as you can see from the slide today. I assume that all of us in this room are convinced and know that we are simply stronger together. The data everywhere proves the point. Even if for moral reasons you don't support anti-racism goals, you know that the economics are there. Clients are demanding diverse legal teams, and also we get better outcomes by having diverse teams on projects. I know that's true at the College of Law, where I have a very diverse leadership team, and they're constantly coming up with new ideas. So for example, I have a veteran on my team who was talking about some of the obstacles that our students who are veterans face in getting their resources and benefits at the College of Law. I was not aware of that. That was not my background. So having that diversity of perspective within my council is incredibly helpful. And that's just one example. So I'm going to presume that everybody in this room agrees that we are stronger together. And I want to do a deep dive into anti-racism and talk about what's racist and what's anti-racist and how we can move forward with an anti-racist agenda. So first, I want to explain the difference between anti-racism and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So there is some overlap between the two. There's overlap when it comes to equity, as in everybody should be equitable. There's also overlap when we talk about wanting to have a diverse profession. But anti-racism is a little bit deeper than that, I think, because it posits that if you're not doing something that's anti-racist, you're doing something that's racist. There is no neutrality here. There is not taking a position. Unlike diversity, equity, and inclusion, where it can lead to performative diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'll give you a great example. So after the horrible murder of George Floyd, law schools jumped on and bandwagons in terms of writing statements about how they supported diversity, equity, and inclusion. I won't say this at a meeting of deans, but most of those law schools haven't followed through with any structural changes consistent with these statements that they've made. And so many folks would say that that's performative diversity, equity, and inclusion. Versus if we're looking at it from an anti-racist lens, that's certainly a first step in having a statement about affording and valuing these things. But if there's no follow through, if there's no there, if there's no change to the existing structure, then you've now moved into a racist system. And also, racism and anti-racism is a continuum. I actually went viral once for being on a, I'm so proud of viral, but I was on a panel and I once said, I'm a racist. And I have been a racist. Because you are either anti-racist or racist at any one moment. It's not a moral critique. It doesn't make one necessarily inherently bad. It just means that at any one moment you're making the decision between a racist action and an anti-racist action. And we can move along that continuum. So that's what I mean, and that's why I want to do a deeper dive into anti-racism and distinguishing it from diversity, equity, and inclusion. So why then is it important to be an anti-racist lawyer? Lawyers, as you know, play a critical role in our society. We represent individuals, organizations, business, and corporations, helping them to resolve legal problems and issues in civil and criminal cases. We act on behalf of tribes, local and state governments, the federal government, and the public interest in promoting truth, justice, and the rule of law. We serve as leaders in our communities, large and small. We write case law as jurists and draft statutes as legislators and policy makers. We oversee the operation of our governing bodies, including the federal government, states, and tribes. We shape policy and we help create social and legal change. In performing all of these tasks, we have a responsibility to consider the experiences of the full diversity of individuals who reside within the United States, who are our clients, and whose lives are shaped by the very laws and policies that we create and enact, as well as the governments that we run. In making these considerations in our legal work, lawyers must take an anti-racist approach. We must do so if we want to ensure a racially just world. As Dr. Ibram Kendi, author of How to Be an Anti-Racist, which I highly recommend if you haven't had a chance to read it, has asserted, there is no being, quote, not racist, and, quote, no neutrality in the struggle for racist justice. One does not have to be a public interest lawyer or a social justice lawyer to be an anti-racist lawyer. Anti-racist lawyers are in corporate law firms, they are in-house counsel for businesses and organizations, they are government attorneys, they are law professors, they are compliance professionals, they are politicians, and they are jurists. So I hope in this presentation, and I already know I'm going to have problems with time, so I'm happy to share this PowerPoint with anybody who would like to, and if you want to talk about how to incorporate these principles into your organization, I am happy to meet with you. But what I want to go over is some definitions. What do I mean when I mean anti-racism and racism? Strategies and tools for embedding an anti-racist framework into your organizations. The type of impact that you can have as anti-racist lawyers. And also to acknowledge the past and future impact of trauma, both in terms of our lived trauma, those of us who are racialized minority lawyers, and also our clients and communities, both lived and historical traumas. So let's start a little bit about terminology, just so that we all know what I'm talking about. So in order to be an anti-racist lawyer, one must understand how race and racism operate in our society. Sociologists Michael Omi and Howard Winant explain that race is not merely a matter of differences in human physiology. Race is a social construction. So for example, for years until the 20th century, being Irish was not white. It's a social construction. The identity of Hispanic has been black and has been white throughout our history. These are not things that are ingrained. It is our society who has said who is who. These are constructions. Racial formation is a social historical process by which race is created, inhabited, shaped, and transformed by social, historical, and political forces, which in turn creates a meaning or meanings that are attached to different racialized groups. So as Omi and Gwenna explained, race is a concept which symbolizes and signifies social conflicts and interest by referring to a different type of human body. Race plays a critical role in structuring our social world. Indeed, Omi and Wyatt define race as an unstable and decentered complex of social meanings constantly being informed by the political struggle. Next, racism then operates at both the individual and the structural level. Racism can be conscious, but it can also be not conscious. Dr. Ibram Kendi defines racism as, quote, a marriage of racist policies and racist ideas that produces and normalizes racial inequalities. What about colorblind racism and common sense racism? So for example, one thing I hear a lot of folks say is, I don't see color. Everybody's the same. That's hurtful to me when I hear people say that, because it's saying, I don't acknowledge your lived reality. I don't acknowledge that you experience the world differently than I experience the world. And that's a great example of a non-conscious racist comment. That I think a lot of folks are just saying that, they're trying to say that I see you with equity, right? I see you as an equal. But what you're telling to the person is, I don't acknowledge your lived reality. So what is colorblind racism and common sense racism? It's another form of individual racism. Such racism is not outwardly racial, it's more subtle. As Bonneville Silva explains, these forms of racial racism otherize softly. Colorblind rationalize racial disparities and inequities as being the result of market dynamics, naturally occurring phenomena, and the imputed cultural limitations of a particular social group. How many people have heard in your lifetimes, well, if he or she just pulled them up by their bootstraps, they can make it and they can succeed? Right? It ignores the reality that many communities face. And again, big kudos to our speakers earlier, because I thought so many of them really told their stories in impactful ways and made this point. It is a more subtle form of individualized racism. Racial stereotypes, myths, and inequities are presumed to be natural, meaning the individuals engaged in these rationalizations view them as just what they are, widely known, widely recognized, and not needing any further explanation. Now here's one that I will admit I've seen in Utah. Nice racism. And I recommend this book to you. If you haven't read it already, it's a quick read. And I saw myself in it, right? My lived experience is as a heterosexual female native. That's the only lived experience I have, who is phenotypically white. So I read myself in that book. It was really eye-opening. And I'll give you an example of nice racism. So you say, oh, we are a collegial group. We interview who other partners might recommend that we interview, because we are a collegial group. Who do you think the other partners are recommending? In my experience, it's usually not diverse folk. Right? It's usually people who look a lot like them, right? The fit. And that's an example of nice racism. That's an example of, well, we're just being collegial, we're being nice to each other. We don't want to acknowledge these differences and have these hard conversations. And that's where we get into a situation where you have an organization that's overwhelmingly non-diverse. And let's talk also about structural racism. I made an example before. So for example, I think the current social system that requires students to take upwards of 400 to 500 hours to study for the LSAT is an example of structural racism. The test itself, I'll go to bat on the test. You heard I was on the board. The test itself has been proven. It's the fact that the affluence and the ability to take that time differentiates, and it negatively impacts racialized minority individuals much more than non-minoritized individuals. Great example of structural racism. And here we know that a racist believes that problems are rooted in groups of people, while an anti-racist locates the roots of problems in policies and power. And a racist allows racial inequities to persevere, but an anti-racist confronts racial inequities. Be uncomfortable. If something doesn't say right, say something. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do. Again, we're nice in Utah. You're a nice group of people. And it can be hard to say, well, let's pump the brakes on this hire because I'm looking at this pool and it's a non-diverse pool. These are hard conversations. As Dr. Kennedy explains, one is either racist or anti-racist. There is no neutral position. Importantly, Dr. Kennedy notes that whether we are racist or anti-racist is defined by what we do. The word racist or anti-racist does not define who we are. Let's say that again. This does not define who we are. You are not a bad person because you accidentally do or say or support a structure that's racist. It is not, I'm not questioning morality. I'm saying that we have to actively interrogate what we do on a daily basis and the structures that we support on a daily basis to make sure that we're moving in an anti-racist and not a racist manner. You can shift on a daily basis between being racist and anti-racist, and that's what I meant when that clip went viral that said I'm a racist. I've made mistakes in the past. Hopefully I've learned from those. Which is why we must be committed to deliberately working to undo racism each and every day and each and every minute. As Professor Kennedy explains, each one of us can be racist one minute and anti-racist the next. What we say about race, what we do about race in each moment determines what, not who, we are. So now in my 6 minutes remaining, let's talk about how we can incorporate these into our profession. I want to give some help to build an even more, build on these great foundation that we already have. I love this legal profession in Utah. I love this group of people. I'm so heartened by everything that we've accomplished. Let's do better. And so some thoughts on how we can do that and how we can cultivate a team and environment that promotes anti-racism. So first, develop a structure to hire a diverse group of employees with anti-racist values. Right? So you could be not a racialized minority, but still have anti-racist values. So this is important to do in terms of how you're developing your team. The first step is to acknowledge that we exist within a racist system and that there are differences. We won't be able to move forward until we do that. I was on a call once with some leaders at the University of Utah, and we were talking about something, and I said, well, you know, racism exists here at the University of Utah, and a colleague at another unit on campus said, you think there are racists at the University of Utah? I was like, yes, we live in the United States of America, yes. Right? You know, it's kind of like eye-opening. So we accept that this exists, and then we think about how denial is the heartbeat of racism. If we continue to deny it, we'll never get better. So we start with acknowledgement. So how do we acknowledge and act further? So what are some of these unexamined cultural beliefs that we buy into? Right? So I'm on the record of not being a big fan of the current bar exam. So one thing could be that the bar examination is a test of competence. No. Oh, somebody's shaking their head. No, I don't think I'm a better lawyer because I passed the bar exam. What it is it's a test of do you have the time and money to take 6 weeks out of your life to study for this exam and remember what the rule against perpetuities is. Anybody remember the rule against perpetuities? He's Grant is our graduate. I'll just point out there. Very good there. But examining those types of things, I don't think I came to that realization until I was much later in my career. I certainly didn't realize it when I was going through the process. I thought if I didn't succeed, there was something fundamentally wrong with me, not that there was something structurally inherent. But how then interrogate, how have these unexamined beliefs and assumptions disadvantaged potential groups? And how can your organization or firm change those policies? So now let's do some best practices for hiring. Building a diverse pool. So construct a search plan that provides a means for reaching a broader and more racially diverse pool of candidates. How can you identify those individuals? Where are they reading things? How can you post things? And again, if anybody, I see some taking pictures of the slide, I will give you this slide. Just email me, and I will give it to you. Develop relationships with minority-serving law schools. There are some, we have 2 great law schools in Utah. There are some amazing law schools out there that are schools of access and are minority-serving law schools who are beating the factors on their incoming metrics, and they're phenomenal. Go develop partnerships, keep your partnerships with the University of Utah, but go and meet them, and I'll be happy to introduce you to those deans. Let's broaden the pipeline. Research out to general affinity groups and affinity groups in the field relevant to your searches. Be really, really thoughtful about whether you need a lateral. So the most diverse pool is the entry-level pool. Do you really need that lateral? Because as soon as you go out looking for the lateral, you've automatically made your pool less diverse. Use your professional networks. Reach out to folks in this room. We're in it together, right? Who cares if you're you or you're Y? Let's come together and grow this pool. If you decide to use a search firm, make sure that it's a firm that has a commitment. So for example, at the University of Utah, a lot of our searches are now done by a female-run search firm that has a demonstrated record on diversity, equity, inclusion, and anti-racism. Forming and preparing the search committee requires that everybody goes through some bias training. We all have biases. I have biases. You have biases. Make sure that we slow down and we confront those biases. Form a direct search committee to conduct your search. And then one of the really important things here is develop a hiring rubric. What you want to move away from is, well, they're a great fit. So when you say somebody's a great fit, what are you saying? They fit in really well with our existing culture. And if your existing culture isn't diverse, well, probably not going to be somebody who's diverse. So make a rubric for every position. What are the required criteria? What are the preferred criteria? And then have the same method of assessment for each candidate, so that when you come to the time to make your decision, you're not sitting here thinking, well, I liked him better than her, or, she had some really great publications in such and such a place, that you're actually comparing the things that are relevant to the jobs. Because you would be amazed, you probably have it from your own experience, of how much we just like to hire folks that look like us. Like, I got really, really excited and was emailing Alyssa Peely, the University of Utah women's basketball team. They made it to the Sweet 16, so proud of them. She's Native, and I was emailing her, you're so awesome. How can I help you? Because, Native women want to help and support her. Well, am I ignoring the rest of the team? Yes, because I'm looking for somebody like me. And so we all do this, it's natural. And so the rubric really helps to avoid that. Drafting the job advertisement, I'm at time, so before I start getting everything that's in your job advertisement is actually a requirement. So I'll give you a really common example that ends up being exclusive, is a requirement of a JD. Somebody who has an LLM can usually do the same work. Sometimes you need a JD. Who overwhelmingly has LLMs? Foreign students, foreign lawyers. So if you have a job posting, it may seem just natural to say JD required, right? This is a legal job. But many folks who have LLMs are barred in other states. They can do the work, and they're legally trained. And if you say JD and you don't really need a JD, you've now cut out a large group of foreign-based lawyers out of your pool. So be very thoughtful about everything that you put into your job search. Execute the search. Please, 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 if you take nothing else away, get rid of the word fit. I hate that word. Right? And it's really hard because you find yourself saying it. The last thing I'll just touch on, because I know I'm over time, is retention and support. So the two things that are incredibly important are informal mentoring and sponsoring. And the two things are different. A mentor is somebody who's going to help you make a decision and gather experience. And all of us have different mentors for different things. So for example, and these people might not look like you. Two of my biggest mentors were white heterosexual men. But they were really good at what they did, and they took me underneath their wing and they helped me. And so you can have things for different people. Now conversely, a sponsor is by definition somebody who's in a position of power. These are the people who you want to know to say good things about you when you're not in the room. Sponsors differ from mentors in that they are and what they do, and by definition, they're senior individuals. So sponsors use their reputation, credibility, influence, and leverage to do public praise of junior individuals, to facilitate key opportunities for juniors, and to share their network with juniors. Also, they're the ones who understand the narratives, who understand the impediments, and sponsors are specifically helping to advance their sponsorees. Now, if you're going to include this, and I encourage everybody to have a system of informal and formal mentorship, make sure that you are evaluating that and that you're providing compensation for that. So for example, at the Quinney College of Law, we have merit pay for our faculty. And there are many ways that faculty can use and can gain merit pay. One of those things is advancing anti-racism goals. We have goals on our website, you can all see them. And so faculty in their merit pay reports to me can talk about how they've worked to advance those goals. and be compensated for that. And you can see where this similar work of mentorship and sponsorship is something that you can value and compensate for in your organizations. Now I'm at time, so I think, of course I knew this was going to happen. I didn't get to like all this stuff. Yeah, there's just a lot to talk about. But I will say again, happy to share this PowerPoint presentation with anybody who would like to discuss it. You have my email address up there. I also want to thank Angela Onwuchi-Willig and Danielle Conway. Angela is the Dean at Boston University and Danielle is the Dean at Penn State Dickinson Law. The three of us did a 2-hour training on this topic, and so I took a lot of this information from the materials we gathered together. So, Shay McGuitch, thank you so much, and thank you for your time.